You're not afraid of missing out. You're afraid of meeting yourself. Paradoxical? Perhaps. But take a moment and think. What happens when you're left alone with your thoughts? When the constant stream of notifications, updates, and likes disappears? Will you face emptiness, or perhaps the self you've been trying to silence for years with the continuous information noise? Imagine your life as an hourglass. But the grains are not just days. They're minutes of your attention, and they're inexorably flowing from the upper part of the hourglass to the lower. We can't add more sand, but we can decide where to direct these grains. Today we'll talk about an experiment that changed my life, my perception of time, and ultimately, my bank account. I disconnected from social media for 60 days, and the results were so stunning that I decided to share this experience with you. But first, let's understand what we're dealing with. The average American spends about 2 hours and 24 minutes daily on social media. That's 17 hours per week, 73 hours per month, 880 hours per year. Picture this. 880 hours equals 36 full days and nights, more than a month of your life every year. But even these figures don't reveal the complete picture. The real problem lies deeper. When Neil Postman wrote Amusing Ourselves to Death, he didn't know about social media yet, but he already warned, the problem is not that television presents us with entertaining content, but that all content becomes entertainment. Today, this applies to our entire information environment. However, modern social platforms have gone further. They don't just entertain. They create powerful addiction. Tristan Harris, former design ethicist at Google, once said, "If you're not paying for the product, you are the product." Billions of dollars have been invested in technologies that make us constantly check our phones, endlessly scroll news feeds, eagerly await new likes and comments. We've become subjects in the most successful behavior modification experiment in history. And it's not just entertainment or addiction, it's the systematic theft of our attention, the only resource that cannot be returned or restored. It's easy to point fingers at big tech companies, but isn't that an attempt to avoid responsibility? After all, no one is holding a gun to our heads, forcing us to open TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter every 10 minutes. Let's face it, there's something in these apps that resonates with our deepest psychological needs. And to understand how to break free from them, we need to understand exactly what these platforms give us. We are social creatures. Our brains evolved to constantly scan the environment for social threats and opportunities. Social media exploit this evolutionary characteristic. They give us social validation through likes and followers, social comparison, the ability to see how others live, sense of belonging, being part of a community status, the opportunity to stand out and gain recognition, dopamine rewards, unpredictable, like slot machines. Our brains simply weren't designed to resist such a powerful combination of stimuli. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the author of the concept of flow, explains that our brain can process about 110 bits of information per second. A conversation with one person requires approximately 60 bits. But when we scroll through a news feed, we process hundreds of images, headlines, comments per minute. The result? A state that neurobiologists call cognitive overload. Our brain is literally suffocating from information. We're constantly in a state of shallow attention, giving a little attention to many things, but not focusing deeply on any. And if we believe researchers, deep concentration is the key to productivity, creativity, and satisfaction. Cal Newport, author of Deep Work, writes, "The ability to focus deeply is becoming not just a competitive advantage, but a rare and valuable skill in our economy." And further, the rule is simple. Productivity equals time times intensity. In other words, 2 hours of deep, focused work can be more valuable than 8 hours of constantly interrupted attention. Here we come to an important question. If social media affects our productivity so badly, why can't we just give it up? The answer has to do with what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. We know something is harming us, but we find justifications to continue doing it. But I use social media for work. I keep in touch with friends and family. It's an important source of news and information. I get inspiration from my role models. Have you ever repeated something similar? Maybe it sounds familiar. Now let me ask an uncomfortable question. Do you really use social media as productively as you think? Or is it perhaps just a convenient way to avoid the uncomfortable fact they've turned into a habit that's gradually consuming your life? Studies show that we tend to significantly underestimate the time we spend in the digital space. On average, people spend 30% more time on social media than they assume. It was with these thoughts that I approached my experiment. I decided to give up all social media for 60 days. Not just limit use, but completely delete the apps from my phone. This step was much more difficult than I expected. The first week was the worst. I literally felt physical discomfort. My fingers automatically reached for places on the screen where social media icons used to be. I constantly checked my phone, though there was nothing to check anymore. Psychologists call this phantom vibration, the feeling that your phone is vibrating even when it's not. In my case, these were phantom notifications, a constant feeling that I was missing something. In the second week, real withdrawal began. I felt anxiety, irritation, even mild depression. This made me wonder, if giving up the information flow causes such strong emotions, maybe it really was an addiction. According to studies by neurobiologist Judith Grisel, addiction is not just a physiological reaction. It's a change in the brain itself, its neural pathways. And most frighteningly, in the case of technological addiction, our brain changes similar to how it does with cocaine addiction. Somewhere in the third week, something amazing happened. The fog in my head began to clear. There was a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in many years. My thoughts became clearer, my concentration deeper. This corresponds to what neurobiologists call a neurological reset. When we free the brain from constant information overload, it gradually restores its natural ability to concentrate and create. I began to notice that I could work on one task for 90 minutes without a break, something that previously seemed impossible. I started reading books, not articles. I began listening to full albums, not individual tracks. But most importantly, I began to notice patterns of thinking and behavior that I hadn't been aware of before. For example, I realized that I instinctively reached for my phone whenever I felt even the slightest discomfort. Boredom, uncertainty, loneliness. Social media were not just entertainment. They were a mechanism for escaping emotions. Psychologist Carl Jung wrote, "What you resist persists. What you face disappears." Having given up the possibility of escape through the screen, I was forced to meet my real emotions. And here's where it got interesting. Instead of filling every free minute with scrolling, I began to notice moments of boredom and discomfort. But instead of avoiding them, I stayed with these feelings. And it was in these moments of emptiness that the most interesting ideas began to appear. Neuroscience confirms this phenomenon. When our brain is in a resting state, the so-called default mode network is activated. This is a special neural mode responsible for introspection, creativity, and planning. The problem with modern digital life is that we almost never give the brain an opportunity to work in this mode. We fill every minute with stimulation, depriving ourselves of a natural source of creativity. Billionaire Warren Buffett is known for keeping his calendar almost empty. When asked what the secret to his success was, he showed his calendar and said, "All you see here are almost empty pages. That's the difference between me and other people. I can say no to almost everything." Previously, I thought this was just an eccentric habit of a successful person. Now I understand that Buffett is protecting his most valuable resource, the ability to think deeply. In the fourth week of the experiment, I began to notice that my productivity was rapidly increasing. Projects that usually took a week were now completed in a few days. I could focus on a complex task and complete it without constant distractions. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi calls this state flow, a moment when we're so immersed in an activity that we lose track of time and self. It's in this state that we're most productive and happiest. The problem with social media is that they systematically destroy our ability to achieve a state of flow. Every notification, every phone check pulls us out of deep concentration. Professor Gloria Mark from the University of California, Irvine found that after being interrupted, people need an average of 23 minutes to fully return to their previous task. And considering that the average person checks their phone 96 times a day, roughly every 10 minutes, it becomes obvious that most of us rarely achieve truly deep concentration. But giving up social media gave me something more than just extra time and concentration. It changed my way of thinking. When you don't see hundreds of perfect lives, filtered photos, and success stories every day, you begin to evaluate your own life differently. You stop constantly comparing yourself to others. Social psychologist Leon Festinger developed social comparison theory, which states that we determine our own value by comparing ourselves to others. Social media have turned this natural human tendency into an endless cycle of comparisons that's impossible to win. Even the most self-confident person can waver when observing the perfect lives of hundreds or thousands of people every day. But without these constant comparisons, I felt like I was returning to my true self. I began making decisions based on my own values and desires, not on what would be Instagrammable or would evoke admiration online. Gradually, my projects became bolder, my decisions more confident. I became less worried about others' opinions and more trusting of my own judgment. In the 5th week, I noticed another important change. The quality of my personal relationships improved. Instead of shallow interaction through likes and comments, I began talking more with people face to face or by phone. These conversations were deeper, more meaningful. Sherry Turkle, a professor of social studies of science at MIT and author of Alone Together, writes, "We expect more from technology and less from each other." She warns that we're replacing real connections with an illusion of companionship, empty rituals of online communication. Without these illusions, I began building real connections. And these connections, as it turned out, had a huge impact on my work and career. I started communicating more with colleagues, clients, partners. Instead of superficial networking through LinkedIn, I met people for coffee. Instead of quick messaging on Instagram, I conducted video calls. The results weren't long in coming. After 2 months without social media, something happened that made me write this article. My income literally doubled. Sounds incredible? Perhaps. But the mechanisms that led to this are quite understandable. Increased productive time. I regained at least 2 to 3 hours daily that I previously spent on social media. Deeper concentration. The quality of my work significantly improved, allowing me to raise prices for my services. Better decisions. Without information noise, I made more considered business decisions. Higher quality connections. Deeper personal relationships led to better professional opportunities. Creativity. Freeing the brain from constant stimulation allowed for generating more innovative ideas. I'm not claiming everyone will have exactly the same results. But think about it. What could change in your life if you reclaimed hundreds of hours annually and improved the quality of your attention? Of course, there was fear. Fear of falling out of the information field, losing opportunities, missing important news. This fear has a name, FOMO, fear of missing out. But in 60 days without social media, I didn't miss a single truly important news item or opportunity. Significant news still reached me through friends, colleagues, or traditional media. Important opportunities appeared through personal connections and recommendations. Instead, I discovered JOMO, joy of missing out. The joy of not needing to be aware of everything, participate in every discussion, react to every trend. Of course, my experiment had challenges. Social media are so integrated into our lives that complete abstinence has its difficulties. Some friends felt irritated by the inability to connect with me in the usual ways. I missed a few events that were only announced on Facebook. Certain work issues had to be resolved through alternative means, but the hardest thing was coping with my own mental habits. As James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, said, "You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems." My systems had been built around constantly checking social media for years. To create new systems, I applied several approaches. Substitution. Instead of complete emptiness, I replaced social media with other more useful activities. For example, instead of checking Twitter in the morning, I read a book. Trigger awareness. I began to notice exactly when the desire to check my phone arose, during boredom, uncertainty, anxiety, creating barriers. I didn't just delete the apps, I changed passwords on all accounts to random characters that I saved in a password manager. Public commitment. I told friends, family, and colleagues about my experiment, which made backing out more uncomfortable. Thanks to these strategies and understanding the underlying causes of my addiction, I managed to last the full 60 days. At the end of the experiment, I had to make a decision: return to social media or continue living without them. I decided to choose a middle path. Instead of complete rejection or full return, I established new rules for interacting with the digital world, social media, only on computer, not on phone. Clearly defined time for checking, twice a week, 30 minutes each. Unsubscribing from all accounts that don't bring real value. Using special apps to block sites during work. Regular digital detoxes. Complete abstinence from social media on weekends. This approach allows me to use the beneficial aspects of social media while avoiding their negative impacts. And although I no longer live in complete digital isolation, the positive changes persist. My income remains at a higher level, concentration, deeper, and relationships of higher quality. If you've ever considered a similar experiment, here are a few tips based on my experience. 1. Start with an audit. Before giving up social media, track how much time you actually spend on them. Use apps like Rescue Time or built-in smartphone tools. 2. Start small. If 60 days seem too difficult, try a weekend without social media first, or a week. 3. Create a communication plan. Let your close ones know how to contact you during your digital detox. 4. Find substitutes. Determine in advance what you'll fill the time with that you previously spent on social media. 5th, track results. Keep a journal or notes about changes you notice in your mood, productivity, relationships. 6. Prepare for discomfort. The first weeks will be challenging. Accept this as part of the process. 7. Find like-minded people. Maybe some of your friends want to join the experiment. Philosopher Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." Social media create an illusion of a rich life, but often steal life itself. My 60-day experiment made me rethink my attitude toward time, attention, and technology. It showed me that the most valuable resource is not information, which is now abundant, but our ability to focus, think deeply, and create. In an era when everyone is fighting for our attention, protecting our own mental space becomes not just a matter of productivity, it's a matter of freedom. The ability to disconnect is becoming a new luxury. As writer Nassim Taleb said, "In a world where information is available, attention becomes a scarce resource." Perhaps the greatest paradox of our time is that rejecting constant connectivity might be exactly what allows us to truly realize our potential. So I ask you, what could change in your life if you regained control over your attention? What heights could you reach if you focused on what truly matters? Write in the comments if you've ever tried to give up social media. What changes did you notice? And what's your biggest obstacle to taking such a step? Thank you for your attention. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit like if this video made you think. See you in the next episode.